Hello and welcome once again to a new episode of The Bike Show, and this week I'll be starting what will be a regular series of riding tips designed obviously to help those of you still relatively new to biking to get the most out of your bikes, stay comfortable and of course be safe. We'll be catching up with the latest new model to arrive at Hero, South Africa, and very fetching it is too. But we're going to have to begin this week's show with a look through the news because there has been a deluge of new models on the international motorcycling scene in the 3 weeks that have passed since our last news roundup. And I'm happy to report that for once, there's nothing about electric bikes. So let's concentrate on good old-fashioned performance and celebrate what the planet's best internal combustion engineers can do with a few drops of petrol, some air and a spark, because we have new models from Germany and Italy that will make you forget all about those whining electric motors and dream once again of exploding fuels and noisy engines and noxious fumes, because you are, after all, a petrol head, not a plug head or a battery head, charge head or even a volt head, at least not yet anyway. So let us first head off to Bavaria, where our friends at BMW have been refining the performance of their superbike and, for me at least more importantly, developing a new naked model that turns the dial all the way up to 11. Unfortunately, many other European manufacturers have long since had their naked sport bike dials set at 11, but definitely better late than never, I say. BMW has had a very good, very fast, very powerful at 165 horsepower naked bike in the shape of the S1000R for some years now. I own one, in fact, a few years ago, and absolutely loved its squinty-eyed looks and cosseting array of electronics. I was really looking forward to the big update to that model that happened back in 2020, but for me at least, it turned out to be something of a letdown. They ditched the distinctive looks in favour of this anonymous, slightly middleweight, naked Japanese bike-looking headlight, and even though they had debuted the shift cam motor on the R superbike, they told us that 165 horsepower was plenty enough for a naked bike and that any more would simply be pointless. Silly even. And anyway, this naked S1000R had amazing torque and in real world situations was quicker than anything ever. And shut up and stop talking about peak horsepower, because all that nonsense is just ridiculous, unnecessary marketing hype, and our bike is the best. So there. Yeah, well, they might not have said it exactly like that, but that's definitely what they meant. But it didn't stop them being wrong. And right to a certain extent. The bike was extremely good, no doubt, but there was no getting away from the fact that it looked more than a bit bland. And since when did a superbike with no fairing and a higher handlebar, which is what all these sporting super nakeds are these days, have anything to do with being sensible? 180 horsepower from KTM Super Ducati with its very sensible marketing name, The Beast. Just under that amount from Aprilia's V4 over 200 horsepower from Ducati's V4 Street Fighter, and 152 or something from their V2 Street Fighter that is pitched as Ducati's sort of beginner entry-level sporting naked. Snigger. It's only down a handful of horses on your biggest, baddest BMW naked bike. Oh, and there's also Triumph Speed Triple with its Gentleman's Express, not playing these silly horsepower games either kind of approach, and yet it still has 175 horsepower. Yeah, BMW needed to stop calling us names for lusting after these wonderful, hugely powerful naked sport bikes. Admit that sometimes we buy with our hearts instead of the cold logic of the left side of our brains, and give us something that tickled our fancies, no matter how illogical the combination of no fairing and massive horsepower might be. Thankfully, they finally seem to have seen the light, because from early next year you'll be able to buy yourself a M1000R. Yes, good move BMW. Just like they gave us the M1000RR, they have now seen fit to give the naked single R the same extreme treatment, and the best news of all is that this model will feature the shift cam engine. That means that we now have those sensible Bavarians squeezing 205 horsepower into a naked bike, at the same time as giving us a whopping extra 2600 RPM to play with compared to the standard S1000R. Oh, and we have wings to help control all that power. And a massive array of electronics, as you would expect, including what seems to be the new norm in this super naked class, and that is semi-active suspension, whose behaviour is linked to the chosen engine mode, though you will still be able to set it up to your own liking, which is what I tend to do, giving myself a quite aggressive throttle response, but combining it with a more comfortable backroads friendly ride quality. And you do all that at the touch of a button. This is the second dedicated M model after BMW debuted the M1000RR at the back end of 2020, and that too has had an update in time for next year. Since this is basically a homologation special for the World Superbike and other national superbike championships around the world, the updates are refinements aimed at improving outright lap time. So you have things like improved aerodynamics, some tweaked engine internals, new electronics, and track-specific stuff like front brake cooling ducts and aero wheel covers. Will they make you faster on your track days or down your favourite back road? Not unless you're Peter Hickman, no. But they will make you look a lot cooler than any other BMW Superbike riders, and that's got to be worth a second a lap at the very least. Leaving Bavaria for the moment, let's head south across the Alps to Bologna in northern Italy, where Ducati has been very busy with plenty of announcements regarding its own new models. Given BMW's big sport bike news, I suppose it makes sense to see what their response might be. And as usual, there is no shortage of shouty performance from the guys in red. I'm recording this just before the final MotoGP round of the year, and I'm going to assume that they've secured the World Championship for the first time in 15 years. And I'm then going to assume some more and guess that with victory in the World Superbike Championship, they've backed that up with another world title to complete a dream year in the international bike racing scene. Appropriately then, the Ducatisti will be able to celebrate with an array of ever more bonkers sporting machinery. By bonkers, I obviously mean outrageously powerful, and although undoubtedly way too much for us average riders to be able to exploit, long may this spec sheet insanity continue. If you have the money and you want the best, then you should be able to buy it, even if only the briefest glimpses of the full performance scares you into a full-blown heart attack. You will die a happy rider. The mightiest madness resides in the shape of the new Panigale V4R, which you will already have noticed by the way that Alvaro Bautista regularly uses that power to blast past Razgatlioglu and Ray whenever a straight appears. So it is hardly a slouch in the horsepower department at the moment, but too much is obviously never enough, and to help maintain that advantage next year, the new V4R in standard trim will develop 218 horsepower, but with a full race exhaust and some race fuel, it will bump that up to a barely believable 240 horsepower. Some minor chassis, suspension and aero adjustments have also been made, and on the electronic side of things there is now a full and low option for the power. Full only electronically limits all that power in the first gear, while low drops the horsepower to 160 for a more sensible road riding proposition. With the low option then, Ducati is obviously going for a new kind of record for the setting least used by any customer ever in the history of motorcycling. There is a further electronic option, quite interesting this one, that changes the street riding mode to a special rain racing mode that also makes the rear light flash like it does on the race bikes, but this obviously makes it, unfortunately, illegal to ride on the road. On the naked Street Fighter V4 front, Ducati has brought in for 2023 some chassis improvements and engine modes directly from the new Panigale, and there is now a SP2 version of the Street Fighter V4. This SP2 version obviously steals some of the limelight from BMW's new M model, but basically it seems like you're looking at the S version of the V4 Street Fighter with a dry clutch, carbon wheels and upgraded Brembo Stylema R calipers. Undoubtedly hugely desirable and undoubtedly hugely expensive as well at 650,000 Rand, being very nearly 200,000 Rand more than the standard V4 Street Fighter and about 240,000 Rand more than BMW's M1000R. Staying with Ducati, we have a final announcement from them, and that is the new Diavel V4. It was only a matter of time before they stuck the V4 Gran Turismo engine in this model, and so here it is, with 168 horsepower in an Italian muscle bike that, like the V2 version, will mix a surprising amount of sport riding ability in with some elements of cruising and even a bit of touring. It also happens to be a not insignificant 13 kilos lighter than its sister model that has 2 fewer cylinders. And of course it comes equipped with all the electronic rider aids and riding modes that you would expect that can be controlled through a new 5-inch TFT screen. The Diavel V4 can look like a single-seater with the passenger seat cover that comes as standard and with the pillion, foot pegs and grab rail folded away, or you can easily convert it for a passenger as long as you have somewhere to stash that seat cover. Staying with the performance theme then, and staying in Europe, we're going to go back north and across the Alps once again, but this time to Mattighofen in Austria. Remember the limited edition RC8C that was released last year and sold on the internet in about half a nanosecond? Well, it turns out maybe it wasn't quite as limited as you might have thought, because there's now a 2023 version that will also be part of another limited production run of 200 and is also probably already sold out. This newer model has had some minor engine mods that together add up to a fairly useful 7 horsepower improvement, so there's now 135 horsepower in total. A blacked out colour scheme on the new bike will ensure that everyone knows you're not a sad loser who's got the older, less powerful version. All you need now is 725,000 Rand hanging around for your track day special. Or failing that, maybe 900,000 Rand for a second-hand original one. Although those values may have fallen now that it's known that it's not quite as limited edition as it was previously thought. Or I suppose you could wait for what will inevitably be 2024's limited run that will undoubtedly have more horsepower, better electronics and a different colour. If that all seems a bit too common and low rent for you, then we need to leave Europe and head over to California, where a certain custom bike builder and Hollywood actor have combined to form the Arch motorcycle company. Gard Hollinger and Keanu Reeves have one model under their belt already, the KR GT1, and now they have a second model in the range, the Arch 1S, that is the first with a single-side swing arm and more aggressive ergonomics for a distinctly more sporty riding experience, so they say. There's a 2032cc S&S Tune V-twin, a steel chassis, billet aluminium subframe, Erlin suspension and good old South African BST carbon fibre wheels. I can't find any indication of power, but there's a claimed 156 Newton meters and a dry weight of 255 kilos, which doesn't seem that bad. It's undoubtedly a striking looking machine, but don't expect to buy one off some dealer's floor. They don't have any dealers. You need to get yourself to the US of A, take a test ride on one of the 2 demo models that they have there, and then they can fine-tune what you want from the bike, maybe quicker or slower steering for instance, and then they'll build your bike to order, adding your own personal finishing touches along the way for a properly bespoke bike buying experience. Oh, and you have to plonk down 2.4 million Rand for the pleasure, which obviously doesn't cover the costs of getting to and from California and staying there and living the high life with Keanu. Right, while you work out how long it's going to take you to save that amount, we'll take a break and return with something much more affordable in just a moment.